Revelation chapter 1. We also see, if we remember, there's been other cases where this has happened. What we have here, this person that is in verse 5, the description that is given here is very possibly a pre-incarnate Christ who was the one who was appearing before Daniel. Some feel it was a high-ranking angel, but most of your conservative commentaries and scholars believe this was a pre-incarnate Christ who came specifically to minister to Daniel and to appear to him. Now you say, well, then if it's Christ, how could Satan and his armies hinder him and keep him back? God works in mysterious ways. Christ could have just like after his resurrection, I think it was something like 12 days after his resurrection, and the disciples were in the upper room, and then poof, all of a sudden, Christ was in their midst. Nothing could stop him. He was there. He walked through the door. He was there. And after he was there for a while, poof, he was gone. He could have done it that way. But in this case, he chose to wait. And he allowed Satan's army to fight. And he sent Michael to come alongside and to fight. And Michael is the one who fought against Satan and his army to defeat them. Then Christ came and met with Daniel. Why Christ chose to do it this way, we do not know. He could have done it in a different way. But what it teaches us is this: we're in a battle, but we're not on the losing side. We are winning. And as hard as it is in some of the things that we go through with these battles like Daniel went through, God is still right there. He was there. And at the appropriate time, he revealed himself to Daniel. Now let's look down at verse 13. Verse 13 says, "But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, excuse me, I'm sorry, I can't get that out. Chief princes came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days. For yet the vision is for many days." And so we're getting into this explanation of what this vision is going to be. We see two things. The vision that Daniel had, that he was troubled with and couldn't quite get an understanding to, was not for the Gentile nation. If you remember some of the previous prophecies we've dealt with, they all dealt with Gentiles, the Babylons, the Medes, the Persians, the Grecians, talking about the future Roman Empire. Those were all Gentile prophecies, all Gentile countries and governments. The statue of Nebuchadnezzar, the vision of the other statue of the four animals and what they represented. They all represented Gentile governments, Gentile nations. But this one here in chapter 10 is not about a Gentile nation. Look at verse 13. The person that was there giving the vision to him says unto him, he says in verse 14, "I have come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people." Gentlemen, we as human beings have a tendency to always pay attention to the big words because we think big words carry a lot of weight. Never overlook the little words of the Bible. The word "but" only got 3 letters in it, but it's a powerful word. right here, the word thy, T-H-Y, three letters, a small word, but an important word. He said, this dream, this vision that you've had, this is about the Jews. It's specifically in relationship to them. And so it's about thy people. And at the very end, the last three words, for many days. You say, for yet the vision is for many days. So what does it mean for many days? Well, what it means is this: it's something that is going to be a long period of time, a long period of time. And so what Daniel is going to have explained to him is something that is specifically dealing with the Jewish nation, his people, and it's something that is going to happen over a long period of time. It's not something that's going to happen quickly. And so he is dealing with issues that's going to take a long time before it comes to a conclusion. So we see that this prophecy that was given to him is specifically for the Jews. Look in verse 15. And when he had spoken such words unto me, I set my face towards the ground, and I became dumb. And behold, like one of the similitude of the sons of men touched my lips. This is one of the angels that had showed up, touched his lips, and opened my mouth, and spake, and said unto him that stood before me, O my Lord, by the vision my sorrows are turned upon me, and I have retained no strength. How can the servant of this my Lord talk with this my Lord? For as for me, straightway there remaineth no strength in me. Then verse 18, then there came again and touched me one like unto the appearance of a man, and he strengthened me and said, fear not, fear not. In verse 21, he said, but I will show thee that which is noted in the scriptures. And so where is the vision? The vision that we're talking about is the vision that takes place in chapter 11. So Daniel sees what is happening. He has spent so much time in prayer, he's become physically weak. And so the Lord gives him physical strength. The Lord picks him up and says, do not fear. I'm going to give you the answer. I'm going to help you so that you can keep on serving. And now that leads us into what that vision was that Daniel had that really was so traumatic to him. And that is in chapter 11 and all the way through chapter 12, verse 3. It was the vision of the tribulation period, a vision of the Antichrist and the terrible tribulation period. And that's where we start in chapter 11. Now, he goes on down and he reads what this vision is, but we want to jump down to verse 36. Verse 36. And see if I got things right here. We want to look here in Daniel chapter 11 and verse 30, beginning through with verse 36, all the way to the end of the chapter. There are 8 different things that are deal with the Antichrist. In these verses, there are 8 different things that God reveals to us what the Antichrist is going to be like. Now, Antiochus Epiphanes, who we've discussed a little, is the one that Daniel had seen before in his prophecies. And he was a picture of the Antichrist. But what we see here in Daniel chapter 11, beginning with verse 36, is a direct description, not of Antiochus Epiphanes, but a definite description of what the Antichrist is going to be like. Now, who the Antichrist is going to be, we do not know. We have an idea, but we cannot be definite. If we believe in the imminent return of Christ, that means the Antichrist is already alive, in a place of political position, and is a full adult man. And so that is the frightening thing. So if he's not alive, then we can't believe in the imminent return of Christ. And the Bible tells us we don't know when Christ is coming. We don't know when the tribulation period is going to take place. Like he told Daniel, this is going to take a long time before this horrible tribulation period happens. It's going to be way down the road, and you will never see it. My parents, my grandparents used to look forward to the coming of Christ, but he didn't come in their lifetime. He might come back while we're still alive. He might not. But the thing is this, as much as I believe the end is near, and he is near, in regard to this description of this man that we're going to look at, if Christ was to come back today, this man who is going to ultimately be the Antichrist is alive, is in a place of recognition, a place where the world already knows him, a place where he has some say. And because of his abilities and because of his position, he very easily will be able to set himself up as the savior of the world when the world begins to fall apart, because all the Christians are gone and the Holy Spirit is gone and evil is running rampant. And the judgments of God is about ready to come. Let's look at these different characteristics. I got to be careful of the time. I didn't set my clock like I did last week, so I don't want to go over. Let's start looking at these characteristics, if we may. Look at verse 36. And the king shall do according to his will. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined shall be done. All right. We see here in verse 36, 4 things about him. First, he will magnify himself. In other words, he is going to set himself up and present himself as being God. See, this is why in the book of Revelation, we study and we see where the Antichrist is going to have his own high priest. He's going to have his own religious system. He will have an individual that after he declares himself God, that will come along and oversee not the political runnings and dealings of the world, of his government, but will have control and oversee the religious running of the one world religion that is under the Antichrist. This is something that's kind of difficult for us to fathom, that this one man is going to be able to bring together all the religions of the world, and they will all deny their basic core beliefs and accept him as God. This is hard for us to comprehend. This is one of the areas of the Bible where we don't have to understand it. We just accept it and believe it. It will be done. Now, we've seen some examples of how this could take place in history, where one nation worshipped a man and they followed him. Pharaoh in Egypt, all the pharaohs were considered a god when they were alive by the Egyptians. The Caesars, they were treated like a god and had ultimate authority. A lot of powerful men over the time of history and over the different governments that we can study about in history showed signs of this. But this man is not going to control one. He's going to set himself up as God, not of one nation, but of the whole world. Because look at it here. What's it say? He said, he shall speak marvelous things against what? Oh, no, let's go back. And he shall magnify himself above every God. There's another little word, every God. But then he will also speak marvelous things against who? The God of God. See how in your Bible, in your King James Bible, where the word God of gods, the first God is capital G, that's talking about Jehovah. That's talking about our God, the one true God. He will speak marvelous things against him. Now we see where the world hates God already. And here comes somebody who is a tremendous orator along the line of Hitler, like Hitler was, who could sway people. And he speaks against God in such a marvelous way that, hey, the people just, they just, as we say here in the States, they eat it up. They just take it. It's like a fish who, when you throw your line into the water and you've got the hook and you got your bait, and the fish comes up and nibbles on the bait, you're not going to catch it. But when that fish comes along and puts that bait in their mouth and clamps down, and you pull on that rope, on that string, and that hook sits inside the mouth of that fish, what do we say happened? The fish took everything, hook, line, and sinker. He took it all. And that's what the people are going to do. They're going to accept hook, line, and sinker. They're going to take everything that this person talks about and accept it and start to believe that he truly is God. He will speak marvelous things. Now, that word marvelous means that he's going to be able to say things about God, excuse me, that to the unsaved make total sense. Doesn't make sense to a Christian, but you got to realize all the Christians are gone at this time. This man, when he comes on the scene, what Daniel is seeing is the vision of what is happening after the church has been removed. The church has been raptured. The Holy Spirit has no longer hindering And he's letting things just, Satan, do whatever he wants. And the people of this world are lost, and they will believe anything. And we see it today. And so when it says he speaks marvelous things, it means that he speaks in a way that what he is saying against God and about himself being the supreme being of all supreme beings, he says it in such a clarifying way that they believe it, they fall for it. Now we also see here that he is one who prospers. Look at verse 37. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers. Now let's stop before we go on. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers. Now I'm not going to make a definitive answer here. I'm just going to share with you what some people think. This is the verse that some people use to support the idea that the Antichrist will come from the Jews, that he will be a Jew by birth, because of the wording. Neither shall he regard the God, capital G, Jehovah, of his fathers. So some people say, this is why we think the Antichrist will be a Jew. And this is why the Jews will be willing to follow him. You see, the Jews have always fought against other religions when they'd come in and try to take over their country. And so some people use this verse to say, this is why the Jews will be willing to follow the Antichrist and worship him as God, because he was a Jew. And they would say, oh, he's our Messiah. Now think that. Now, I'm not going to say that that is exactly what this verse is saying. I'm just sharing with you. This is the verse that some people use to teach that. I personally believe that he will be a Gentile because he's going to be the ruler of the old Roman Empire that has been revived. He's going to bring back the 10 nations from Europe that were under the Roman Empire. And when he gathers them together and he comes along and he gathers them into one unified group, and then they expand, the rest of the world begins to kind of start falling in place. The rest of the world, except for the king of the north, the king of the east, and the king of the south, but the rest of the world will all fall into place. In order to be able to do that, he must be a European. He must be someone who is a Gentile. And so that's the position that I take, that the Antichrist will be a Gentile man. But the door is open for another interpretation because of this verse. So let's move on. He shall neither regard the God of his father, nor the desire of women. What does that mean? He shall not regard the desire of women. What is one of the biggest problems that we have in the world today, at least here in the States, and I'm sure you might probably have it over there too. One of the biggest problems we have here in the United States is the sin of homosexuality. Does that fall into here? Is that what this is talking about? Where he will not have a desire for women? Does that refer to the fact that he'll have no women on his cabinet? There will be no place for women in his government. And women will be subdued and treated like they used to be for many centuries, and in some countries are still treated as servants, the lowest of the low. We can't say, but that's possibility But this is talking about that he'll have no connection with women physically, or he'll have no connection with women and no place for women in his government. Further study for you to do. This is something for you to do some research on and do some further study. Nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself. So we see that this man has no regard whatsoever. What this tells us, he is not a natural person. He's unnatural. He's not normal. He's abnormal. Now, before the tribulation, like he's just seemed to be like anybody else. But from all indication in others, when the rapture takes place, it's to the place where he establishes himself as the leader. At this point, somewhere in this point in time, this person, queen, human being, became depossessed. On everything that he does, he is under the control of Satan. You study the book of Revelation, you see Ezekiel, Jeremiah, some of the other prophets. From this point on, from the tribulation through the whole tribulation, was totally possessed of no decisions of him. Warped Satan so much that he had given himself over, and Satan was living inside of him and controlling. We see some pictures of the Bible. You think about those prophets of Baal, that when Elijah, what did they do before he did that? They got there slicing themselves, cutting themselves, practically bleeding to death, trying to call upon God. That's Satanism. You've got the men over in your country who would fall into that category, and the unsaved would call them holy men. That's Satanism. We see this with other places in the scriptures. So we see this man here was not natural. When you looked at him, he did not have the eyes of a man. You looked into his soul, and all you saw was wickedness, deviousness, hatred. And so we see that this individual was unnatural. Look at verse 38 and verse 39. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces. This is referring to the devil. And a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and precious stones and pleasant things. In other words, gold, silver, precious stone. What do these represent? Basically, this is what people give to in their tithes and offerings to sustain the work of whatever religion they're part of. Some places, some countries that are not able to do this, they give food to help sustain the work. But what this is representing, where it talks about the giving, and he shall be honored with gold, is that people will be giving their honor to him instead of giving to their, shall we use the term loosely, their religious community and the religious system and their churches. They're abandoning them. He's their God, and now they start giving offerings to him. They give their gold, their silver. They give their tithe, shall we say, to him to sustain his religious system. Then verse 39, thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. And he shall cause them to rule over many and shall divide the land for gain. It's springtime over here in South Carolina. The flowers are in bloom. The leaves are coming on the tree. And the pollen is coming out too. So if you have hay fever or trouble with pollen, you'll be doing what I'm doing with my handkerchief throughout the whole lesson. So we see here in verse 39 that thus shall he do in the most strongholds of a strange God. Strongholds. In other words, he is going to set up key locations around his kingdom, around the world. He's going to set up strongholds. In other words, certain locations. And in these strongholds, in these locations, he will cause them, he will acknowledge and increase in his glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many. In other words, he's going to, shall we say, he's going to establish outposts around the world. He's going to have one place that is going to be the main central place of where he's going to have his worship and where his religion will be. But he's going to have outposts in every country around the world. And it's where these different outposts are, he's going to have people that have been put in place of prominence, in place of power. And there is where it says he will cause them to rule over many. Them, who's them? Those whom he puts in places of power, those he puts under him to oversee his religious and his political realm. And they will rule in his place under his authority over many. And he will divide the land. He'll split all countries up. There will no longer be, shall we say, an England or France or a Germany or an Italy or whatever country it might be. He will take them, he will establish outposts, he will divide all those countries up so that they are no more. He will have one country, his country, his country. And it tells us here that he will divide it for one reason, for gain, to gather things. He's everything that comes in, he will own it. He will take control of it. So these are some things we've seen about the Antichrist and what he is going to be like. Let's take a quick 5-minute break here. and then we'll pick up with verse 40 and start talking about some of the other descriptions of him. Okay. All right. Oh, I need a break so I can stand up and stretch my old bones.